continue from the previous lesson, or load the file Chapter 18 Office Suite Render 02.max. So far, we've been rendering with a fairly low quality Final Gather solution. The low level of quality is causing noticeable noise and visible blotches of light in the final rendering. Now, we're going to adjust the Final Gather quality in order to obtain a better result. In the ribbon, click Rendering, Render Setup. In the Render Setup dialog, click on the Indirect Illumination tab if it's not already open. Indirect illumination, specifically Final Gather, is critical to lighting analysis because it uses Final Gather inside of Mental Ray to calculate the bouncing of the light around the room. By calculating the bounced light, Final Gather is able to give us an accurate representation of the illumination in the scene. In order to make the Final Gather more accurate, there are three main parameters we will need to adjust. The initial Final Gather point density is a multiplier for the density of the initial Final Gather points. A lower density, about 0.1 or 0.2, will render quickly but with a low quality. A higher density, about 0.8 to 1, will take longer to render, but will render with a much higher quality. The rays per Final Gather point determine how many rays are used to calculate the indirect illumination. Again, a higher number, say 500, will provide a smooth image but will take longer to render. A value of 50 will render quickly, but the final rendering will contain visual noise from the Final Gather. Diffuse bounces sets the number of times each ray is bounced when determining the indirect illumination in the scene. We'll start by increasing the Final Gather point density. In the Final Gather rollout, basic area, set the initial Final Gather point density to 0.6. This will increase the density of the initial samples for final gathering that Mental Ray will use. Set the rays per Final Gather point to 250. This will increase the number of rays shot out for every Final Gather point. Now, most importantly is diffuse bounces. Remember, this value determines how many times light will bounce around the room. The higher the number, the more accurate the lighting in the room will be. Set the diffuse bounces to 8. This will be the starting point for a good quality lighting analysis Final Gather setup. Go ahead and save the file.